With you on the day the world ends. Season 2 is here, and it's as thrilling as ever. The story picks up right where the last season left off. Due to the food shortage on Sarushima, Hibiki and Kene cautiously sneak into a supermarket. However, they find it in complete disarray. With everything already looted, they also discover the body of a zombie. Recently, they've noticed that many of the bodies they come across have strange marks on their faces, and they have no idea who or what is responsible. Back on Sarushima, Hibiki reports everything he found to the group. After all, their food supply is running low. The group speculates that the supplies might have been taken by a shelter or similar organization. They knew about a shelter called House of Hope, where Shoko and her daughter had already gone, but they chose not to join them to avoid trouble. But now, it seems like they don't have a choice. However, Tsuboi doesn't believe in shelters, so the idea of going to one is temporarily put on hold. One day, while Kurumi is hanging the laundry, she notices something strange on her arm. It seems like the virus Shudo injected into her before is starting to show symptoms. Because of the antibodies in her body, she hasn't been infected, but now she's starting to experience strange reactions, which worries her. She tells Hibiki about it, and he reassures her, saying that she hasn't been infected and that she shouldn't worry. But that day, something goes horribly wrong. Tsuboi's subordinate Haru gets bitten by a zombie. Watching his subordinate die, Tsuboi is devastated. When Haru eventually turns into a zombie, Tsuboi has no choice but to kill him. But then the question arises, there are no zombies on the island, so how could this have happened? Kene notices the strange marks on Kurumi's arm and stands up to confront her. She rolls up Kurumi's sleeve, revealing the terrifying veins. Tsuboi immediately pulls a gun on Kurumi. They all agree that Kurumi must have bitten Haru, and they begin to accuse her. And sometimes, Kurumi does experience moments of mental fog. Not just Tsuboi, but even Kurumi herself feels like she might have bitten Haru. Seeing Tsuboi's rage, Kurumi realizes she can no longer stay on the island. Hibiki, of course, believes in her without question, and he chooses to leave with Kurumi. They find an abandoned house to rest in. Kurumi, afraid she might turn into a zombie and harm Hibiki, tries to convince him to leave her, but Hibiki speaks tenderly, offering words of encouragement and love, and Kurumi eventually relents. Then, Hibiki went out and took care of all the zombies around the house. Meanwhile, inside the house, Kurumi's face begins to show the same terrifying veins. Is she about to lose control? At the last moment, her antibodies manage to hold the virus back, and she doesn't transform. However, she suffers from memory loss and no longer remembers Hibiki. When she sees Hibiki, Kurumi is frightened and runs away. On the way, she encounters a man from the shelter. The man sees Hibiki covered in blood chasing after her, and he assumes Hibiki is trying to harm her, so he knocks him out. When Hibiki wakes up, he's in a completely unfamiliar room, shocked by what he sees. Isn't this supposed to be the end of the world? Why does everything seem just like it did before the apocalypse? Confused, he stumbles downstairs and is taken aback by the luxurious lobby. Stepping outside, he gazes at the grand building behind him. It seems he has arrived at the House of Hope shelter. In the cafeteria, many people had gathered, and the food wasn't much worse than it was before the apocalypse. It was like a paradise. The man who knocked Hibiki unconscious yesterday was named Ren. He finds Hibiki and, after understanding the situation, apologizes to him. Ren took Hibiki to Kurumi's room. When Hibiki reaches out to touch Kurumi, she instinctively recoils. Kurumi had lost her memory and didn't recognize Hibiki at all. Hibiki, feeling helpless, had to leave the room. Inside the shelter, Hibiki indeed saw Shoko and her daughter. Yuzuki excitedly hugged Hibiki. Seeing that Shoko and Yuzuki were safe made Hibiki happy too. During dinner, Shoko told Hibiki about everything that had happened since they arrived. Soon, Kurumi's diagnosis report came in. Takuro said Kurumi was in a state of coexisting with the virus. Memory loss was a side effect, but whether the virus would worsen was still uncertain. Takuro told Hibiki that there was a medicine at the Fukushima Medical University that could suppress the virus's growth. However, the area had just been drained of nuclear wastewater a year ago, and going there now would most likely expose Hibiki to radiation, which could lead to immediate mutation. But Hibiki didn't care about the risks. He entrusted Kurumi to Ren and set off alone for Fukushima to find the medicine. In Sarushima, after Hibiki and Kurumi left, they discovered a zombie on the island. There weren't supposed to be any zombies on the island. It seemed that someone had deliberately brought this zombie there. Now, they realized they may have wrongfully accused Hibiki's girlfriend. However, Tsuboi shows no remorse. He began to suspect that the people from the House of Hope shelter were behind this. But what could their goal be? blinded by revenge. Tsuboi refused to listen to anyone. He commanded everyone to follow his orders from now on, and anyone who defied him would meet the same fate. He finished speaking and immediately shot Omazaki to set an example. Left with no choice, everyone had to submit to Tsuboi's orders. Tsuboi insisted that they storm the House of Hope. At that point, Hiro came up with a clever plan. They didn't know anything about the shelter's armed forces, so why not pretend to be survivors and infiltrate the place to assess the situation? Tsuboi thought the idea made sense and agreed, but afraid that Hiro might be tricking him, Tsuboi threatened to bring Yohei and the others along, so Yohei and Kane had no choice but to agree. They set off, killing zombies along the way, and finally reached the gates of the shelter. However, the entrance is eerily empty. With nightfall approaching, they consider retreating. Just as they were about to leave, someone ran out from inside. It was Yuzuki and Shoko. They excitedly hugged Yohei. When Shoko introduced them to the shelter members, she said, "This is my husband, this is my son, this is my nephew and his wife, and this man is my husband's brother." Seeing that they were a family, the shelter staff nodded and accepted them. In this post-apocalyptic world, being able to sit down for a meal like this had become a luxury. As Yohei ate, he couldn't help but shed a few tears. It had been so long since he'd had a peaceful meal. Shigeru, watching from the side, sneers at the scene. After finishing their meal, Yohei and the others realized that the shelter was self-sufficient and had no reason to bring zombies to the island to kill Haru. But Tsuboi believed that humans were the most complex creatures, and not all attacks were driven by hunger. It could also be driven by fear or resentment. They learned that Hibiki had gone to Fukushima, so they all went to visit Kurumi and apologize for accusing her earlier. However, Kurumi had completely lost her memory and didn't remember any of it. Then, that day, a zombie was suddenly pushed into the shelter. Clearly, a mysterious man had brought it in. The zombies on Sarushima must have been brought in by the same person. Coincidentally, a pregnant woman was nearby. The zombie slowly approached her. Kene heard the woman scream and rushed over, taking the zombie down and saving the pregnant woman. Unfortunately, the woman had already been bitten. Back in the shelter, the husband stared at his wife in sadness. Kurumi also arrived, and she knew the pregnant woman couldn't be saved. All she could do was help her deliver the baby, hoping the child might still have a chance. After a lot of effort, the baby was successfully born. The pregnant woman gazed lovingly at her baby and shed tears of happiness. Suddenly, the pregnant woman mutated, and Kene stepped forward and killed her. During the delivery of the pregnant woman, Kurumi's arm is exposed, revealing her infection. As a result, they began to shun her and wanted Ren, the shelter's leader, to euthanize her. But Ren says Kurumi is his fiancée and manages to quell the commotion. Meanwhile, only two people remained guarding Sarushima. One was Jian, Minjun's sister, and the other was Rikudo. Suddenly, the sound of zombies' growls echoed from afar, and they knew something bad was happening. It was clear that the mysterious man had brought a horde of zombies to the island. Jian and Rikudo retreat to the innermost room, but the zombies quickly surround the door, trapping them inside. Rikudo's pistol fires its last bullet, leaving them with no way out. In a desperate attempt to give Jian a chance to escape, Rikudo ignores her pleas and slashes his wrist, using his blood to lure the zombies away. His sacrifice allows Jian to flee. Soon after, a figure in a trench coat, the mysterious man, appeared, holding a katana. He ruthlessly decapitated Rikudo. The news of Sarushima being overrun by zombies quickly reached the House of Hope shelter. Kene and the others were saddened, knowing that Rikudo and Jian were most likely dead. They then realized that someone had deliberately brought zombies to Sarushima. The zombies in the shelter were probably also a result of someone's actions, but who was so malicious? At this point, Ran and his assistant made an announcement. 2 more people had sacrificed their lives while collecting supplies, and now they needed to select 2 people from the shelter's residents to join the supply team. Everyone was terrified and afraid of being chosen. Hiro raised his hand, and Kene also volunteered. Back in the room, Yohei thought to himself that he couldn't let people look down on him. Although he wasn't really the father, he really hoped he could be. Therefore, he decides to take on the responsibility of being the head of the household and starts working alongside the shelter staff. Meanwhile, Hiro and Kane left the shelter and planned to meet up with the main supply team. Suddenly, they noticed some movement in a nearby cave and decided to hide and watch. It was then that Tsuboi, who had been missing for a few days, appeared. He warned Kane and the others not to be careless, as their backs were completely unguarded. It turned out that Tsuboi had been investigating who killed Haru and had made some progress. After saying that, he left quickly. As Hiro and Kane passed through a residential area, they heard growls from inside. They decided to check it out. Little did they know, they were being followed. Walking through dense trees, the ground was littered with corpses. Hiro turned around but couldn't find Kane. The next moment, he was knocked out cold by a blow to the head. When Hiro woke up, he was horrified to find himself bound in a room. The growling outside makes it clear that zombies are nearby. Hiro screams for help, but no one responds. As he struggles, the zombies break through the door. With the zombies closing in, Hiro couldn't break free from the handcuffs. Just as a zombie lunges at him, Kane appears and saves him. Kane explained that when she woke up, she had been handcuffed in the next room. She was luckier, as her handcuffs had broken. With more zombies outside, Kane barricaded the door, but Hiro's handcuffs couldn't be removed after a long time. He was about to give up and told Kane to leave on her own. However, Kane noticed that Hiro was shivering, so she hugged him to keep him warm. As night fell, the zombies outside became more restless. With the barrier about to break, Hiro made the hard decision to have Kane use a chainsaw to sever his hand, but Kane couldn't do it, so Hiro took matters into his own hands. In the end, Hiro and Kane managed to escape. Through their harrowing ordeal, they develop feelings for each other and decide not to return to the shelter. Back at the shelter, another zombie is released near the iron gates, slowly making its way inside. Yuzuki is searching for something at the shelter's construction site. It turned out that Yohei's tie was missing, and she was helping to look for it. Hearing the growls of zombies, Yuzuki panics and tries to run, but she trips, causing a stack of steel pipes to collapse behind her. After a moment, the scene was in chaos, with only Yuzuki's foot left outside. Inside the house, Shoko was already frantic with worry. Her daughter had left early in the morning and still hadn't returned. Yohei was also very worried upon hearing this. They searched for a long time before finally finding Yuzuki at the construction site, but Yuzuki had lost a lot of blood and needed an urgent transfusion. At that moment, everyone was horrified to discover a zombie had been drawn in by the scent of blood and crawled into the house. Ren shouted for everyone to use the back exit and pulled out a knife, stabbing it into the zombie's skull. But Ren's strength was too weak, and the zombie didn't die. It grabbed Ren's leg and tried to bite him. Luckily, a nearby child grabbed a blood-soaked pillow, attracting the zombie's attention. Taking advantage of the moment, Ren mustered all his strength and finally killed the zombie. After hours of emergency treatment, Yuzuki pulls through and is out of danger. However, the recurring incidents of zombies sneaking into the shelter weigh heavily on everyone's minds. Back in the medical room, since Ren had called Kurumi his fiancée, Kurumi had grown fond of him and wanted to learn more about him. Having lost her memory, Kurumi has spent the most time with Ren recently. Ren, unable to resist, kissed her. Coincidentally, Hibiki returned from Fukushima and witnessed this painful scene. He wanted to punch Ren, but his weak body made him faint instead. When Hibiki wakes up, Ren confesses that he genuinely loves Kurumi and asks Hibiki to let them be together. Furious, Hibiki kicked Ren out. He then went to Takuro to vent his frustration, telling him that he hadn't found the medicine in Fukushima, and asked if there was any way to restore Kurumi's memory. Takuro told him that it could only be done by Kurumi herself. While Hibiki was alone outside, lost in his sorrow, Tsuboi found him. Tsuboi said the killer of Haru, or their accomplices, were in the shelter, and he had found some leads. Hibiki realized that Tsuboi was serious. Soon, Hibiki noticed something was off. He overheard Ren secretly communicating with someone over the walkie-talkie. One night, Ren was indeed making a deal with the mysterious man. He had brought supplies to him. The mysterious man finally reveals his face. It's Minjun. What was going on? Hadn't Minjun died? He whispered into Ren's ear. Xian, who had escaped Sarushima, finally arrived at the shelter as well. That night, Ren sneaked into the storeroom, where large piles of food were stacked, clearly planning to steal some, but Tsuboi had been prepared and caught him red-handed. Tsuboi brought Ren before the others, brandishing a gun to threaten everyone, saying he knew Ren had been supplying the man who attacked the island. Hibiki confronts Ren, furious and tempted to shoot him on the spot, but Kurumi suddenly stepped in front of Ren, saying, "I believe him." Seeing his wife defending another man, Hibiki is heartbroken. He walked away dejectedly. In the end, Tsuboi didn't kill Ren. On a dark, moonless night, Tsuboi took Haru's knife and left. Ren, however, had his own reasoning. He confessed to Kurumi that the mysterious man had threatened him, so for the safety of the shelter, he had to supply the food. After all, They had no defense force. Kurumi and Ren embraced, and Hibiki witnessed this moment, but he no longer cared. Not long after, Kurumi found Hibiki and asked about their past. Hibiki patiently shared stories, but Kurumi couldn't remember anything. In the end, she returned the ring to him. They shook hands and said a final goodbye, though Hibiki seemed calm on the outside. As soon as he was out of Kurumi's sight, he broke down in tears. Taking one last look at the engagement ring, he lets go of all attachment. Meanwhile, Ren made a decision. He told everyone he would meet with the mysterious man one last time, promising not to hide anything from them anymore. This time, when facing him, Ren demanded that the mysterious man never threaten him again and end their partnership. Shien examined Kurumi and was shocked to discover that Kurumi was pregnant. When Kurumi heard the news, it was like a bolt from the blue. As you might have guessed, the child is Hibiki's. In the end, Hibiki made a decision. Since Kurumi no longer remembered him, he would let Kurumi be with Ren. He gave the handgun he took from Tsuboi to Ren, hoping Ren would protect Kurumi well, and then prepared to leave. However, just as Hibiki is about to exit the shelter, Shoko rushes over in a panic. It turned out that mysterious man's revenge had begun. When Hibiki and Shoko arrived, Yohei was lying on the ground, a long gash carved across his back. The distinctive cross-shaped mark signified the start of mysterious man's vengeance. Yohei was calling the name of his companion, a young boy. Hibiki slowly approached with a knife, only to find the little boy's severed head, a brutal act that left him horrified. Despite everything Hibiki had been through, seeing this scene still made his scalp tingle. They rushed Yohei to the medical room, where Kurumi and Jien worked desperately to save him, but Yohei ultimately passed away. The group blamed Rin for this, and a sense of panic spread throughout the shelter. People felt that it was no longer safe, and everyone began preparing to leave. Hibiki spoke up, saying he had been to Fukushima, and there was no place safe outside either. They needed to unite and fight back against the enemy. He knew that Ren's refusal to trade with Mysterious Man had triggered this retaliation, so he suggested that Ren continue with the trade. However, Ren was not happy about this. After all, he was the one in charge of the House of Hope, and it wasn't Hibiki's place to take over. At the same time, Ren overheard Kurumi and Jien talking. Kurumi is pregnant, and the child isn't his, it must be Hibiki's. To get back at Hibiki for taking charge, Ren revealed to Hibiki that Kurumi was pregnant, and the child was his. Hibiki was stunned. He was overwhelmed with pain. If it weren't for protecting Kurumi and Yuzuki, he wouldn't want to stay. Ren then prepared to meet with Mysterious Man again. This time, Shoei insisted on going with him, and Ren agreed without much thought. On the other side, Hibiki learned from Shoko and Jien that Sarushima had been taken over by zombies, and that zombies occasionally entered the shelter. This was clearly a human-made issue. Hibiki suspected that one person couldn't have done it alone. There must be an inside man in the shelter. Led by Shigeru, Hibiki discovered that the iron door had been left unlocked. Who was in charge of the gate? Shigeru suddenly realized it was Shoei. Ran and Shoei went to meet Mysterious Man, but Mysterious Man never showed up. That's when Shoei reveals his true colors. It turned out that the reason zombies occasionally got into the shelter was because Shoei had been causing it. He resented that Ren's mother didn't let his child into the shelter back then, so he had been plotting revenge. He had been sneaking zombies into the shelter, framing Mysterious Man for it, and it seemed like his plan had been very successful. Suddenly, Shoei plunged a knife into Ren's stomach. When he was about to deliver a fatal blow, Ren surprised him by pulling out the handgun Hibiki had given him. This caused Shoei to freeze in place. Hibiki, who had learned the truth, also arrived just in time. As he prepared to intervene, Ren shot Shoei dead. Ren then turned to face Hibiki, preparing to kill him to silence him. Ren is unstable, and Hibiki, fearing he might fire accidentally, tries to calm him down, promising not to reveal anything, but Ren didn't believe him. He fired a shot at Hibiki's abdomen, and Hibiki collapsed in pain, but luckily, the wound wasn't fatal. When Ren got close, Hibiki seized the opportunity. He pulled Ren down to the ground, then snatched the gun and threw it aside. Ren is riding on Hibiki, ready to strangle him. Because Hibiki's gunshot wound was severe, he couldn't fight against Ren, so he had no choice but to try to move Ren with words. He said to Ren, "You're going to be a father. Did you think about your child when you did this?" Angrily, Ren blurted out, "That's not even my child." Time seemed to freeze. It was then that Hibiki realized the child was his. Hibiki's anger erupted in an instant. He immediately pressed Ren down, then began punching him relentlessly. But in the end, he decided to spare Ren's life. He helps Ren to his feet, and they begin their journey back to the shelter. On their way back, they encountered zombies. Just as Ren was about to be bitten, Hibiki saved him. Ren was confused, asking why Hibiki would save him. Hibiki replies, "I want to be a father my child can look up to." They finally made it back to the shelter, but as soon as they entered, they were stunned. The sight that greeted them was a slaughtered scene, bodies everywhere. They collapsed to the ground in shock. Xian struggled to crawl toward the crying baby. Yuzuki had been hidden by her mother and managed to survive. But her mother would never return. All of this was the work of Mysterious Man. It was clear that one person couldn't have done this. The killer was likely a group of people. Ren suddenly found it laughable. In a world where a child has no future, how can one talk about being a proud father? That night, Mysterious Man contacted Ren. Ren immediately became tense. He grabbed the radio and asked why they were doing this, saying he was willing to continue the trade. But no answer came. Mysterious Man's group had deliberately left Jian and Kurumi, the two doctors, behind. Now, they contacted Ren to tell him that if one of the doctors went to them, they would stop. Kurumi had a plan in mind. She went to find Hibiki, but Hibiki spoke first. He said that he would protect the child in Kurumi's womb and would go to fight Mysterious Man. Kurumi reassured Hibiki that he didn't need to go. Mysterious Man wouldn't harm anyone else. Hibiki didn't quite understand what Kurumi meant. Kurumi then told him, "Whether it's a boy or a girl, this child's name will be Future." Hibiki placed his jacket over Kurumi's shoulders and then left. After Hibiki left, Kurumi suddenly noticed the ring on the floor. Looking at the ring, Kurumi's heart trembled. In that instant, everything came rushing back to her. She remembered every moment with Hibiki, but she didn't intend to tell him. To protect the others, she, as a doctor, decided to go find Mysterious Man. She passes through the unlocked iron gate and steps outside the shelter. The cold wind whipped around her, and Mysterious Man was ahead. Touching the ring on her finger, Kurumi chooses to follow the Mysterious Man. The next morning, Hibiki is frantic when he can't find Kurumi. He learned from Ren that Kurumi had left the shelter to find Mysterious Man in order to protect everyone. Ren, whose life Hibiki saved, promises to do everything in his power to protect the remaining survivors. Hibiki said nothing. He glanced at Ren before turning and walking away. He wouldn't let Kurumi, who was pregnant, bear this burden alone. He would go save her. Hibiki set off on his journey to find her. Meanwhile, Yuzuki, filled with determination, vows to avenge her mother and Yohei. Having lost her mother, Yuzuki decides to leave with Hibiki. Hibiki walked up to her, extending his hand. They walk out of the shelter hand in hand, like a ray of warm light piercing through the cold, desolate apocalypse.